the Middle-aged Bodcast. Getting older, but having some laughs.
Welcome to the Middle-aged Bodcast with me, Raging Rich.
And me, T.A. Shelano.
And T.A., we are here with the first of a couple of bonus episodes. We finished season 4. Fantastic season, really enjoyed recording, and thank you again to everyone who guested and to everyone who has listened to an episode. But we are here with a very special bonus episode as we are talking about your second novel.
We are, Rich, and normally you'd talk about something like this in the sense that it's about to come out, but there's no release date yet. So it is a bit preemptive, but I thought, it's worth us giving the listener a bit of a link into after we talked a lot about my first book, The Doctor's Hidden Patients. Go get it if you haven't already. And we'll talk about where I've been going with this second book, which we've been kind of talking about. So world exclusive-ish, or certainly in broadcasting terms, the working title of my second book, Rich, is Escape from Batechu Island.
Finally, we can reveal the working title, having heard it a few times over the last few months. So, T.A., what is this new book about?
Well, here we go. The Hunger Games meets Castaway as a group of disenfranchised teens are pushed their limits by a deadly dystopian conspiracy as they fight powerful enemies and each other to escape from Batechu Island.
I mean, that right there, that's the story of the trailer there, isn't it? In a world. We should be.
You could do it in that voice.
We mentioned, didn't we, in a previous episode about turning The Doctor's Hidden Patients into a movie. Christopher Nolan, if you're listening, make it, sign it up, give TA some money, get the rights.
I'm all about the art. Let's get the art right, Rich, before the money. Like working with you, it's all about the art, less about the money, as my season 5 of contract shows as well too. Let's look at it. So that is, in a nutshell, tagline of this. It's going to be a standalone sequel to The Doctor's Hidden Patients. So it doesn't directly follow my first novel, but there are some links back. If you hadn't read the first one, you could read this and it's fine. You wouldn't need to have read the original book. But if you have, you'd definitely find that connection through it.
Excellent.
What is your view of the description, having seen nothing of the book yet?
I like the idea of it being The Hunger Games meets Castaway. It kind of reminds me a little bit of that sort of battle royale type story, just from that being said.
Yeah, but again, it's one of those things where I initially sort of started around this and was going to do something completely different to The Doctor's Hidden Patients, and there wasn't going to be any connection back whatsoever. So it's strange how it sort of worked out that I was having a discussion with somebody at Writers Retreat in Birmingham, early days when I started on this book, which was just at the time the concept was just called Batechu Island, actually. The escape from has been added in since. And I was explaining to this guy I was talking to about it, and he said, have you thought about then linking it back to the first book? And I said, I hadn't really, but actually that might be something in that. And the more I went through the drafting, the more that kind of connection came through, and it became really fun actually to write back with the connection to the first one in a way that I hadn't intended when I'd started out. And then it sort of led into, with feedback from The Doctor's Hidden Patients, from all the, I wouldn't say millions, but the at least scores of readers, there's been a lot of views that they'd like to see the before. So in a really strange way, I've ended up having people reading the first book while I'm writing what turns out to be the third book, with the first book becoming the second book, because people have then said we'd like to see before. So the first book becomes the second book and the prequel becomes the first book when I've been writing a third book. So in a roundabout way, Rich, I've not explained that very well, but I think I've sort of written, or when I get to the third book, it'll be a trilogy.
It's kind of like Star Wars, where episode 4 came out first and they had to wait decades to get episode 1.
Maybe, but the strange thing is I never set out to write a trilogy. I was like, I'm writing one book and I thought I'd never finish that. So to then get to this point where I end up writing a follow-on, but people read the first one and say, I'd love to see what went before. It's kind of made this natural fit now of wanting to turn it into a trilogy and seeing how that would work. This being almost like the end point now is quite unique when you've not even written what becomes the first book. But it does then give you that great hook of the bits that followed.
Essentially what we're saying, listeners, for anyone who's confused by that timeline, TA wrote The Doctor's Hidden Patients. It was going to be the only book. Then he started writing the standalone of Escape from Batechu Island. However, somebody said link it back to the previous book. So now, essentially, your first book is a story, the second book is a prequel to that, and then the third book is the sequel to the first book.
I think what we're just going to say here is, I think you say we're going to break it down. The Doctor's Hidden Patients is technically the first book, but it's going to be the second book of the trilogy. The Escape from Batechu Island is my second book, but it is the third book of the trilogy. And the next book that's not written and not titled would become essentially the prequel and become the first book in the trilogy.
Okay, so essentially what we're saying is once the third book comes out, we've got to redo the covers for the previous two books and put them all in the order you're supposed to read them in.
No, we're going to leave the order as is because there'll be standalones also. So don't forget, you can pick up Escape from Batechu Island whenever it gets out there and read it having not read what's gone before. Or you could go and say, hey, start with the first one, go to the sequel, or start with the first one, go to the prequel. But when I write the prequel, which isn't written at all yet, I will write it in a way that that's a standalone book as well.
I get it. So it's essentially saying that these stories do link together. It's kind of like, I'm going to use the Star Wars reference again, but you could technically watch Rogue One having not seen any of the other Star Wars movies, and it's fine. It links to other movies, but it doesn't matter if you haven't seen those movies.
Yes, I made sure that you could read Escape from Batechu Island without having to have read The Doctor's Hidden Patients. So I was really deliberate around that. Obviously, I want you to read all the books that I do, but I wasn't making it so you're going, well, what's he doing with this? I don't understand. You know, I've kind of tried to make it so that is clear.
So, Tiag, you were doing the 100-day writing challenge as part of putting this book together. How did that kind of come into play, and what did that lead to in terms of helping to give you that inspiration to finish the book?
So I started drafting this book in March of 2024, which was before The Doctor's Hidden Patients had been released. As you know, that was released in October of that year. So I'd kind of, having done a first book that was not yet released, started them obviously working on this as the follow-on, and then went through all the process of getting the Doctor's Hidden Patients out there, and was sort of working on this book in the background. When I got to the end of 2024, I'd sort of got around the sort of 30,000-ish words mark on written, and I really wanted to push the momentum forward. Seeing, various things online about how can you, committing, moving something quicker and time and whatnot, and got inspired into this whole thing around doing essentially this 100-day writing challenge from early January, which was to write something every day, no matter how short or long that may be. Now, as you know, I go to some of the writers' retreats where you dedicate a few hours to writing and get a lot done on a sort of a Sunday when I go to those. But it was all those other days, the days where you're busy and life's really busy, and where do you find that half hour? Where do you fit something in? And I was actually making notes and holding myself accountable on social media as well to that every day of what I was doing, how many words I was writing. And I'd got like a sort of keeping a record as well as I was going along. So my shortest day's writing, Rich, was 161 words. And my best day was day 100, which fell on a writer's retreat in mid-April, where I actually managed to do 3,000. And combined, over the 100 days, I wrote over 51,000 words. So then I ended up at this point where I was almost towards a completed draft. By the 100-day point, there was just a bit more. Then I had to obviously sort of go on from there to get a completed draft. And now, at the moment, I'm kind of going through a bit of an editorial process with it. The 100-day writing challenge gave me that momentum, that taking you forward with something, keeping you in the story. It was more effective for my time. So where, I've had it in the past where you do something and then you get busy and you don't do something for a week or whatever. You lose track of where you are. When you actually do something every day, you really keep that flow and you're in the characters and the story and moving it along a lot quicker without having to stop, go back, reread what you've been doing because you're in that zone.
You briefly mentioned the editing there, Tia, and I remember when you did The Doctor's Hidden Patients, you had an independent editor look through the book. Is that something you're looking at doing again with this one, sort of going through those same channels? Or are you thinking now with what you learned from writing and releasing the first book of doing something a little bit different?
So I'm looking at different options in terms of editing. I mean, where I'm at the moment, it's still very much my editing before I kind of get into that part of it, I would suggest, because you kind of get to a point where you're like, right, I want to make sure I'm happy with where I am with this. And that takes quite a bit of work in itself, where you're going back over things and you then read something a little bit later on and think, I'm not sure about that. Just the other day, I was looking at, say, one of the chapters and I just didn't like the opening. And I was just like, you know what, actually, there's something that can be added there. And I just wrote kind of a few paragraphs of almost like a bit of a backstory for the character that wasn't there. And it just led that chapter in a little bit better. So I'm going through that. You're obviously looking out for some of your typos and different things that you do before you kind of then go through that process. But yeah, it's certainly something that I'll be looking into. And it's a very important part of the writing process, to be fair.
And we've touched very briefly on the plot line with your sort of pitch, the hook of the story at the start of this episode. What can readers expect from this book?
Well, it's, again, like the Doctor's Hidden Patience, I've kind of tried to go down a fairly pacey style. I mean, obviously the genre, the thriller genre kind of leads you into that, but I'm very much one of those people who keeps a story moving. I don't like long spells of perhaps not a lot happening. So yeah, the joy with this one is the story kind of runs in parallel for quite a while, where you've got the people on an island and then people back in the UK essentially trying to work out what's going on. And so you have this sort of parallel time running, which is of the different characters on the island and the characters back in the UK that sort of build you up through the story. And I've got a real eclectic mix of characters in this book, Rich, of different ages as well. So although the teens are a focus, obviously older people come into this story as well. And people you wouldn't expect become really quite pivotal to the story.
I think what I really liked about the Doctor's Hidden Patience and what you've said there actually about the pacing and things, and I think the thing I can most compare it to in a way is 24, the TV show, where there's constantly something evolving the plot along. So if anyone's never seen 24, and the books aren't set in sort of real time like that, there's obviously different time periods that go through it, but the actual pacing in terms of something happens, there's an event that then pushes the story through. That happens a lot in 24, and I kind of get that feeling from reading the Doctor's Hidden Patience. That's kind of what it reminds me of in a way. That sort of there's the main story arc, but then there's these plot points driving it forward, where there's always something new coming through. I'm getting kind of that vibe from you that it's very similar with this story, that it's going to be that similar sort of style of there's a main plot point, but there's those twists and turns coming in there thick and fast.
There's that, and then I think it's the linking back to the first one as well. Those little bits that come in as well that take you back to the Doctor's Hidden Patience. I've tried to write those in a way that you wouldn't expect them either, because this is different characters from that book as well. So you are following different people in a different time. I think that's something else we should probably reference here. So the Doctor's Hidden Patience was set in 1999, and this is actually set in 2027, so more to the current time. And for anybody listening, yes, that is easier when you try to do continuity stuff to some degree, other than the things that might happen between 2025 and 2027 that I can't foresee. It's different around research, because you can obviously apply things technologically and sort of culturally much more to the current time. When I was writing the Doctor's Hidden Patience, there's a lot of work going back to the tech in 1999 and some of those kind of things in popular culture. So it's a different way of writing something, but you've kind of captured it in a way. The nature of this story and the way I wrote the first one, they are similar in that the action and the pace and the plot lines do come through. Whereas, to be honest, although it's a book that's not yet written, the prequel will be different. It will definitely be written, I think, in a different way, because it needs to focus much more heavily on a smaller character subset and a story set over a longer period of time that would lead you up to effectively the Doctor's Hidden Patience. So I've got to think about writing that, and I'll be writing that in a very different way, which will be a good challenge for me as well from an author point of view.
I think we need to just touch upon a few things from the first book and the things that you've learned since, and doing the writers retreat, doing the Jericho Writers event that you went to quite recently as well. and applying kind of what you've learned into that. And how do you feel you've kind of grown as an author from those experiences you've had and the feedback that you've had from the Doctor's Hidden Patients moving on to this second novel?
You mentioned the Jericho Writers Festival, which I went to quite recently. Part of that was being able to send a synopsis and a cover letter and the first 5,000 words of your project for review by somebody in the industry. So that was, for me, different as well, to go and sit physically in front of somebody, albeit for a very short period of time, like a 10-minute slot, to talk it through. The feedback that he gave me was really great. He sort of said, your characters and your dialogue jump off the page. And he quoted a line back at me from that opening 5,000 words and said, yeah, I really get that and whatnot. So I think in terms of that development through as a writer, I imagine if you go back to early days of the Doctor's Hidden Patients, if I'd sat down in front of somebody and said, here's my first 5,000 words of that, they would have been probably much more, well, you can tell you've not done much writing, perhaps. Whereas I think you learn as you go and you pick up bits from feedback. And we talked previously about where to engage with an agent in the industry around the first book and the editor, where you get those professional insights as well and how you can improve. And I probably brought those into the second book. So I'll be thinking about things they said that helped me with the first one and helped me improve the first one. And I think that to then sit in front of the gentleman a few weeks ago at the Jericho and have him say, oh, that jumps off the page, and quote a line back, you think, yeah, I've probably learned something through that. And he helped you develop then as a writer.
It's quite a common thing, I think, between the writing and the podcasting, actually, where we're learning still as we're going along, and we are trying different techniques out of editing, of trying to do things like removing little mistakes, but also cleaning up the audio, things like that. And there's stuff we learned from going to Uni Podfest in Birmingham, and we've mentioned that previously. So I do think it does help going to these events. I can't speak from the standpoint of an author, but I do know from when you've spoken about it, those things that you've learned. And I feel like my big thing to anyone, whether it's writing, podcasting, or any kind of creative endeavor, if there's something out there where you can go and speak to people and get peer-to-peer support, or if you can get just some feedback on things you're working on, I think it's really valuable. And that's what I'm getting from what you've been talking about here.
I think having an opportunity to meet with other people doing stuff, whether it's from a practitioner point of view or people who are much more in the professional of an industry that, you're just doing stuff as a creative, will help you. You will pick up bits of information and advice and guidance. And I think the other thing is you learn through doing. So if I look at my writing now on the second book compared to like the first book, and hopefully as you go into third book, you can see the progression as you've developed through doing something and dedicating that time to something. And the podcast is a good example of that, because I've actually had sort of people we know who've listened to the podcast from sort of early days to more recent, and say, you can really tell the difference in how you've developed from those earliest episodes to the more recent episodes. And with interviewing people, you do develop skills and enhance, and you get better at it. The idea that you go into something straight off and you're going to be amazing, unless you're just some kind of prodigal talent for something, you do need that. And even those people with, you think of sport, look at the amount of even people who've got an aptitude for something, the amount of hours and hours of practice that goes in. I think of reading about the likes of David Beckham, Cristiano Ronaldo in football, the amount of hours that they spend dedicated to that. I think Beckham used to spend time after training just practicing free kicks. That kind of dedication to something and getting better and better. Even when you've got talent, you still need to keep working at it. And it just shows you, we've been doing the podcast, for a year. And yeah, if you look at that sort of development over time, it's quite noticeable.
Well, I think that's been really, really informative there, TA. And hopefully our listeners have gained quite a good bit of inspiration from there with any of their creative projects. And I do think it's worth us sort of doing these little catch-ups on some of the creative endeavours that we've got and things that are going on. And it has been great to chat about it. Looking forward to getting to actually read the book once it's ready to go.
If you obviously continue to follow us with the podcast, we will, of course, update you as and when we are able to give more details about when that's going to be out and published.
And we will hopefully, in the nearer future, be giving some information on an audiobook for the Doctor's Hidden Patients as well.
Yes. So another thing from the Jericho conference was I did speak to a publisher around doing an audio book. And that is an idea I am definitely exploring. Just need to get some studio recording time to an 84,000 word book, which is it's a challenge. It'll be a different challenge, but it is one I'm also exploring. And if you've not heard it already, we, of course, did have me reading out the first chapter of The Doctor's Hidden Patients as one of our bonus episodes previously. So by all means, if you've not heard that, go and check that out. And on my website, shelanobooks.co.uk, you can still find the first 3 chapters are available for free. Other than that, obviously, it's available on various retail outlets, mainly Amazon and Smashwords.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Tia. It's been great to catch up on the book, have a little bit of a chat about the progress that's going on there, and as ever, wish you the best of luck with that. We have one more bonus episode scheduled after this, which I don't know how I've managed to convince you to do it, but we're doing an episode on Batman.
Yeah, that would be a different thing to get into, I think. I will may well be playing second fiddle to you in that episode, I suspect, with your superhero aficionadum. Not even a word, is it? But I'm going to apply it to you. You are a superhero aficionadum. It should be the award that's given to superhero aficionados.
We shall see how that goes. Hopefully, you guys are going to really enjoy listening to that.
And you won't need to look out for a bat signal for it because it will be all over our socials and you'll know when it's there. And if you know, or if you don't know when Batman Day is, you should look at that as well.
We are going to be putting out some more reposts as we have been prior to this episode going out. So please do look out for those. Please follow us on social media. There'll be a little stinger coming up in a moment that will tell you all our social platforms for you to follow us on. And they're also linked up in the description and show notes. But yeah, that brings the episode to a close, I think. So thank you very much, TA.
Thank you. Goodbye.
One more middle-aged podcast in your life?
Of course you do. Follow us on social media for behind-the-scenes stuff, extra larks, and all our latest updates.
We're on Instagram and Threads at Middle-aged Bodcast.
Facebook's easier. Just head to facebook.com/middle-aged podcast.
If you're still hanging on to Twitter or X or whatever it's called now, we're at Middle-aged Bodcast.
And if you're on Blue Sky, it's at middleagedpodcast.bsky.social.
Or you can swing by our website, middleagedpodcast.co.uk.
Give us a follow and stay in the loop.
Cheers for listening.
Two best mates, yeah, they take you to stand. Rachel, Rich, and TA got your health in the hands. Williams, laughs, and tales they tell. For beats and nights, the workouts, they're keeping it real. Oh, it's the middle-aged